Rain hammered Manhattan the night Elena Whitmore made the most dangerous decision of her life. Her abusive fiancé had just dragged her into Maravento, the kind of restaurant where power whispered across crystal glasses and secrets cost more than the wine. Damien's hand crushed her wrist beneath the tablecloth, promising violence later when a stranger crossed the room and sat down uninvited. The stranger wore Italian silk and carried the weight of an empire built on blood. His name was Roman Vescari, and the entire restaurant went silent when he spoke. What happened next changed everything. Keep watching until the end and drop a comment with your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Let's begin. The rain came hard and merciless against the towering glass windows of Maravento, each drop exploding like accusations against the kind of Manhattan restaurant where billionaires whispered deals and politicians traded souls behind champagne smiles. Elena Whitmore sat frozen at the center table, her spine rigid, her hands folded in her lap like a child awaiting punishment. Across from her, Damien Cross leaned back in his chair with the easy confidence of a man who believed the world owed him everything. He looked perfect tonight. Tailored navy suit, silk pocket square, hair swept back like some Wall Street prince. But Elena had learned long ago that perfection was just another lie Damien wore well. She picked at her salad, moving arugula around the plate without eating, her stomach too twisted to accept food. The restaurant buzzed with low conversation, the clink of silverware, the soft laughter of people who had never known what it felt like to be slowly erased. "You're embarrassing me," Damien said quietly, not looking at her. His voice was low, controlled, dangerous in its calmness. "Sit up straight." Elena straightened immediately, hating herself for it. 3 years. 3 years of this suffocating dance where every breath required his permission, every word needed his approval. She had been 26 when they met, bright-eyed, ambitious, working her way up in a marketing firm with dreams bigger than her studio apartment. Damien had been charming then, attentive, sweeping her into a world of expensive restaurants and weekend trips to the Hamptons. The criticism started small, little comments about her clothes, her friends, the way she laughed too loud at parties. Then came the isolation. One by one, her friends stopped calling because Damien always had a reason she couldn't see them. Her family grew distant because he convinced her they didn't understand their relationship. By the time the emotional violence became physical threats, Elena had already been hollowed out from the inside. "The waiter keeps looking at you," Damien said, his jaw tight. "You smiled at him." "I was just being polite," Elena whispered. "Polite." Damien leaned forward, his hand snaking beneath the tablecloth to grip her wrist. Not hard enough to bruise where anyone could see, just hard enough to remind her who controlled this moment. "You think he cares about polite? You think any man in this restaurant isn't imagining what you look like without that dress?" Elena's breath hitched, her chest tightened. The familiar panic crawled up her throat like insects under her skin. "I'm sorry," she said automatically, the words bitter and practiced. Damien released her wrist and picked up his wine glass, swirling the burgundy liquid like nothing had happened. "We'll discuss this at home." Those 5 words landed like a death sentence. Elena nodded, her eyes fixed on the table. She had become an expert at making herself smaller, quieter, invisible. Survival required erasing herself piece by piece until there was nothing left that Damien could destroy. But someone was watching. At the neighboring table sat a man who looked carved from shadows and old-world violence. Roman Vescari was 42, though his dark eyes carried the weight of someone much older, someone who had seen too much and survived worse. He wore a charcoal suit that fit like Italian money, silk and precision and quiet danger. His black hair was swept back, streaked with silver at the temples, and his hands rested on the table with the stillness of a predator deciding whether to strike. Roman had been dining alone, conducting business over grilled branzino and espresso with men who spoke in whispers and left quickly. He noticed Elena immediately, not because of her beauty, though she was striking even beneath the exhaustion weighing down her shoulders, but because of the fear. Roman Vescari had spent his entire life surrounded by fear. He knew its shape, its smell, the way it made people fold into themselves like paper cranes crushed under careless hands. He watched Damien lean forward, watched Elena flinch, watched her wrist disappear beneath the tablecloth. Roman's jaw tightened. Years ago, his younger sister had nearly died in a relationship just like this. By the time Roman found out, She had been hospitalized twice, her spirit broken, her sense of self shattered. Roman had handled the situation permanently. The man who hurt his sister disappeared quietly into the kind of darkness that asked no questions and left no witnesses. Since then, Roman had sworn an oath to himself. He would never ignore abuse when he saw it. Damien stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the polished floor. "I need to use the restroom," he announced, tossing his napkin onto the table. "Don't embarrass me while I'm gone." Elena nodded, her eyes still downcast. The moment Damien disappeared around the corner, Roman stood and crossed the room in 3 strides. He moved with the fluid confidence of a man accustomed to taking what he wanted, his presence commanding immediate attention from the waitstaff who recognized him instantly. Roman pulled out Damien's chair and sat down across from Elena like he owned the air between them. Elena looked up, startled, her green eyes wide with confusion and alarm. "You need to leave him," Roman said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of inevitability. "Tonight." Elena's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stared at the stranger in shock, her mind scrambling to process what was happening. What?" she finally managed. "The man you're sitting with," Roman continued, his dark eyes never leaving hers. "He's hurting you. You need to leave him tonight before it gets worse." Elena's hands trembled in her lap. Who are you?" "Someone who recognizes pain," Roman said simply, "because I've spent my entire life surrounded by it." "You don't know anything about me," Elena whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. "I know he controls you," Roman said. "I know you're terrified of what happens when you get home. I know you've convinced yourself this is normal, that you deserve it, that leaving would be worse than staying." Elena's breath caught. Tears burned behind her eyes. "How?" "Because I've seen this before," Roman interrupted gently, "and I swore I would never ignore it again." Before Elena could respond, footsteps echoed across the marble floor. Damien returned, and the entire restaurant went silent. Damien froze mid-step when he saw the stranger sitting in his chair, his face contorting from confusion to rage in seconds. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Who the fuck are you?" Roman stood slowly, deliberately, his movements controlled and precise. He adjusted his cufflinks casually, as if Damien's fury was background noise. "Roman Vescari," he said calmly. The name hit the restaurant like a shockwave. Whispers rippled through the dining room, heads turned, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Damien's rage faltered, replaced by something far more dangerous: recognition. Everyone in New York knew the Vescari name. Half the city's luxury developments secretly belonged to the family. The other half feared them. Roman Vescari controlled construction unions, waterfront properties, and layers of legitimate business built over generations of old-world power. But beneath the polished surface lived something darker, something whispered about in boardrooms and investigated quietly by federal agents who never found enough evidence to act. Roman Vescari was not a man you confronted. He was a man you avoided. Damien's jaw worked silently, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. "This is none of your business." "Actually," Roman said, his tone still calm but carrying an edge sharp enough to cut, "I'm making it my business." "Elena," Damien snapped, his eyes never leaving Roman. "Get up, we're leaving." Elena sat frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to obey, to stand, to follow Damien out the door and accept whatever punishment waited at home. But something else stirred beneath the fear, something small and fragile and nearly forgotten. Defiance. "No," Elena whispered. Damien's head snapped toward her. "What did you say?" "I said no." Her voice was stronger this time, though her hands still trembled. Damien lunged forward, reaching for her arm, but Roman moved faster. In one fluid motion, he stepped between them, his hand catching Damien's wrist midair with a grip that promised broken bones if necessary. "Touch her," Roman said quietly, his dark eyes boring into Damien's, "and you'll spend the rest of your life regretting it." Damien tried to pull away, but Roman's grip tightened. Pain flashed across Damien's face. "Let go of me," Damien hissed. "Walk away," Roman replied. "Now." For a moment, it looked like Damien might swing. His free hand twitched, his body coiled with rage and humiliation. But then 2 men in black suits appeared from the shadows near the bar, silent, professional, deadly. They moved like ghosts stepping out of darkness, flanking Damien on either side. Roman released Damien's wrist and stepped back. "Escort Mr. Cross outside," Roman said to the men. "Make sure he understands this conversation is over." Damien's face went red. "You can't do this! This is assault! I'll have you arrested!" Roman smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Go ahead. Call the police. Let's see who they believe." The two men in suits moved forward, their hands firmly gripping Damien's arms. He struggled briefly, shouting threats and curses, but they guided him toward the exit with the efficiency of men who had done this 100 times before. The restaurant patrons watched in stunned silence as Damien Cross, Wall Street golden boy, charming manipulator, abuser, was escorted out like common trash. The door swung shut behind him. Elena sat trembling at the table, her entire body shaking violently now that the adrenaline was crashing through her system. She couldn't breathe properly, couldn't think, couldn't process what had just happened. Roman sat back down across from her, his expression softening immediately. "You're safe," he said gently. "He won't touch you again." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand. He'll come after me. He'll find me. No," Roman interrupted firmly. "He won't. Because if he tries, I'll handle it." "Why?" Elena choked out, the word barely audible. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Roman was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes distant. "Because years ago, I failed someone I loved, and I swore I would never let it happen again." Elena stared at him, this dangerous stranger who had just upended her entire existence. Outside, rain continued hammering against the glass windows, the storm growing fiercer. Thunder rumbled somewhere over the Hudson River. The restaurant slowly returned to its normal rhythm, though every eye still flicked occasionally toward their table. "What happens now?" Elena whispered. "Elena." Roman pulled a sleek black phone from his jacket and made a call. "Marco." "Yes. Send the car to Marivento, back entrance." He paused. "And arrange accommodations, secure location, tonight." Another pause. "Understood." He ended the call and looked at Elena. "You're not going back to his apartment. My people will retrieve your belongings tomorrow. Tonight you'll stay somewhere safe." "I can't just—" "Yes, you can," Roman said. "You just did." Elena's mind spun. Everything was happening too fast. 3 hours ago, she had been trapped in a nightmare she believed would never end. Now she sat across from a man whose name carried terrifying weight across New York's underground world, and he was offering her an escape she never thought possible. "I don't have anywhere to go," Elena admitted quietly. "My family, we don't speak anymore." Damien made sure of that. "You have somewhere now," Roman said, "and tomorrow we'll discuss how to make sure he never comes near you again." "Why would you do this for me?" Elena asked again, searching his face for ulterior motives, for hidden agendas, for the trap she knew had to be coming. Roman leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping. "Because I know what it looks like when someone is drowning, and I'm tired of watching people go under." 30 minutes later, Elena found herself in the back of a black Mercedes with tinted windows, the city lights blurring past as rain streaked the glass. Roman sat beside her, silent and watchful, his presence both comforting and terrifying. They pulled up to a luxury apartment building in Tribeca, the kind of place with doormen in uniforms and security cameras in every corner. Roman guided her inside through a marble lobby, up a private elevator, and into a penthouse apartment that looked like something from a design magazine. "This is one of my properties," Roman explained. "You'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest." Elena stood in the center of the living room, overwhelmed and exhausted. "I don't understand any of this." "You don't have to," Roman said. "Not tonight." He moved toward the door, then paused. "There's food in the kitchen. Clothes in the bedroom closet. They belong to my sister. Lock the door behind me. Don't answer for anyone except me." "Wait," Elena called as he reached for the handle. "What if he finds me?" Roman turned, his expression unreadable. "He won't. But if somehow he does, there are men outside who will make sure he never reaches this door." And then he was gone. Elena stood alone in the silent penthouse, her mind reeling. She walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, pressing her forehead against the cold glass. Down below, Manhattan glittered and churned, indifferent to her suffering, indifferent to her salvation. For the first time in 3 years, Elena was alone, truly alone. No Damien monitoring her phone, no Damien controlling her movements, no Damien waiting in the next room with criticism and cruelty. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She sank to the floor and wept, ugly, gasping sobs that tore through her chest and left her trembling. She cried for the woman she used to be. She cried for the years stolen from her. She cried for the fear that still gripped her throat even now, even here, even safe. Across town, in his midtown apartment, Damien Cross paced like a caged animal. His phone rang constantly, friends asking what happened at Marivento, colleagues gossiping about the scene he'd caused. He ignored them all. His thoughts circled one name, Roman Vescari. Damien wasn't stupid. He knew exactly who Roman Vescari was and what the Vescari family represented. But rage and humiliation burned hotter than common sense. Elena belonged to him. She was his fiancée, his possession, his to control. And no one, not even Roman fucking Vescari, had the right to take what was his. Damien grabbed his laptop and began searching. Finding Elena wouldn't be easy, but it wouldn't be impossible. He knew her routines, her passwords, her weaknesses. He would get her back. And when he did, she would learn what happened to women who embarrassed him. Meanwhile, Roman Vescari sat in his office 3 blocks from the Tribeca penthouse, nursing a glass of scotch and staring at security camera feeds displayed across multiple monitors. One screen showed the building entrance. Another showed the penthouse door. A third showed Elena sitting on the floor by the window, her shoulders shaking. Roman's jaw tightened. He had made a choice tonight, a choice that would ripple across his carefully constructed world. Intervening in Damien Cross's abuse had been instinct, but protecting Elena going forward would require strategy. Damien Cross wouldn't let this go quietly. Men like him never did. They clung to control even as everything crumbled around them. Roman pulled out his phone and made another call. Vincent? Yes, it's me. I need full surveillance on Damien Cross, phones, emails, movements, and I need legal on standby. Restraining orders, protective custody options, whatever it takes. He paused, listening. Yes, I'm aware of the complications. Handle it anyway. He ended the call and returned his gaze to the monitor showing Elena. She had stopped crying now, sitting motionless by the window, staring out at the city. Roman wondered what she was thinking. Wondered if she understood that her life had just changed irreversibly. Wondered if she realized that accepting his help meant stepping into a world where power operated by different rules, rules written in blood and enforced through fear. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, she was safe. And for Roman Vescari, that was enough. The rain continued falling over Manhattan, washing away the night's sins while the city dreamed its dark dreams. Somewhere in the storm, 2 lives had collided, one drowning, one offering salvation. Neither understood yet what price that salvation would demand, but they would learn soon enough. Because in Roman Vescari's world, nothing came free, and everything had consequences. Elena woke to unfamiliar silence. No traffic noise bleeding through thin apartment walls. No Damien's alarm screaming at 5:47 a.m. exactly. No dread sitting on her chest like a physical weight. Just silence. She opened her eyes slowly, confused by the soft Egyptian cotton sheets beneath her fingers, the way morning light filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city that suddenly looked different. For 3 disorienting seconds, she forgot where she was. Then it all crashed back. Marivento, Roman Vescari, Damien being dragged out like garbage. Elena sat up quickly, her heart hammering, half expecting to find Damien standing in the doorway with that smile he wore when he was about to make her pay for embarrassing him. But the penthouse remained empty except for her ragged breathing and the distant hum of the city waking below. She checked her phone. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages, all from Damien. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through them, watching his descent in real time. The first messages had been angry, threatening legal action, demanding she come home immediately, calling her ungrateful and stupid. Then they shifted to desperate apologies, promises to change, reminders of all the good times they'd shared. By 3 a.m., the messages turned dark. You belong to me. No one takes what's mine. That Italian gangster can't protect you forever. I'll find you. I always find you. Elena's stomach turned. She knew that tone, knew what came next. Damien never let go of anything he considered his property. A knock at the door made her jump, her phone clattering to the floor. "Miss Whitmore?" A woman's voice, professional and calm. "My name is Sophia. Mr. Vescari sent me." Elena wrapped herself in the oversized robe she'd found hanging in the bathroom. Silk, expensive, carrying the faint scent of cedar and something else she couldn't identify. She crept to the door and peered through the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway, maybe mid-30s, dark hair pulled into a severe bun, wearing a tailored pantsuit that screamed competence. Behind her stood one of the silent men in black suits from last night. Elena opened the door slowly, keeping the chain lock engaged. "I'm not here to hurt you," Sophia said immediately, reading Elena's fear with practiced ease. "Mr. Vescari asked me to check on you and bring some essentials. May I come in?" Elena hesitated, then unlatched the chain. Sophia entered carrying 2 large shopping bags and what looked like a leather attaché case. The security guard remained in the hallway, his presence both comforting and unsettling. "I brought clothes in your size," Sophia explained, setting the bags on the kitchen counter. "Toiletries, basics. Mr. Vescari thought you might need them." She paused, her expression softening slightly. "He also asked me to explain your options." "Options?" Elena's voice came out hoarse. Sophia gestured toward the living room. "May we sit?" They settled onto the pristine white sofa. Elena perched on the edge like she might need to run. Sophia relaxed but alert. The attaché case sat between them like a small bomb. "I'm a lawyer," Sophia began. "I handle certain matters for the Vescari family. Mr. Vescari wants you to understand that you have choices moving forward. First, we can pursue a restraining order against Damien Cross. I've already drafted the paperwork. Given last night's incident and these—" She gestured to Elena's phone, still clutched in her hand. "We have grounds." Elena stared at her. "That's it? A restraining order?" "That's the legal option," Sophia clarified. "There are other approaches if you prefer something more comprehensive." The way she said comprehensive made Elena's skin prickle. "I don't understand." Sophia's expression remained neutral. "Mr. Vescari has resources beyond the court system. If you want Damien Cross to leave you alone permanently, there are ways to ensure that happens." "What kind of ways?" "The kind that don't appear in police reports." Elena's mouth went dry. She thought about Damien's texts, his threats, the 3 years of systematic destruction disguised as love. Part of her, a dark, exhausted part she barely recognized, wanted to say yes. Wanted Roman Vescari to make Damien disappear the way powerful men had been making problems disappear since the beginning of time. But another part recoiled. "I don't want anyone hurt," Elena said quietly. "Even him?" "Even him." Sophia nodded, no judgment in her expression. "Then we'll proceed legally. I need you to document everything, emails, texts, any history of abuse. Can you do that?" Elena nodded numbly. "Good." Sophia opened the attaché case and pulled out several documents. "You'll also need to stay somewhere secure while we process the restraining order. Mr. Vescari has offered to extend his protection during this time. This apartment, security personnel, anything you need." "Why?" The question burst out of Elena before she could stop it. "Why is he doing this?" Sophia's expression shifted, something almost sad flickering across her professional mask. "Because his sister almost died at the hands of a man just like your ex-fiancé. And Roman Vescari doesn't make the same mistake twice." Before Elena could respond, Sophia's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, frowned slightly, then stood. "I need to take this. Look over the documents. I'll be back in an hour to answer any questions." She left quickly, the security guard closing the door behind her. Elena sat alone in the silent penthouse, staring at the legal paperwork spread across the coffee table. Her entire life had been shredded and rearranged in less than 12 hours, and she still didn't understand why a man like Roman Vescari, a man whose name made restaurant patrons go silent, would care about her suffering. She picked up her phone and scrolled through Damien's messages again, her chest tightening with each word. 3 years of this. 3 years of making herself smaller, quieter, less. 3 years of believing she deserved the cruelty because that's what Damien had convinced her was true. Anger began replacing the fear. Hot, unfamiliar anger that made her hands shake for different reasons. She grabbed a pen and started writing. Across town, Damien Cross sat in his midtown office, his eyes bloodshot, his jaw tight enough to crack teeth. He'd spent the night making calls, cashing in favors, trying to piece together where Roman Vescari might have taken Elena. Nothing. Every contact, every connection, every person who might have information suddenly went silent the moment he mentioned the Vescari name. It was like hitting a wall built from fear and old-world loyalty. His assistant knocked tentatively. "Mr. Cross? Your 10 a.m. is here." "Cancel it," Damien snapped. "Sir, it's the Harrison account. They've been waiting 3 weeks." "I said cancel it," the assistant fled. Damien's phone rang. Unknown number. He answered immediately, desperate for any lead. "Mr. Cross." The voice was male, heavily accented, unfamiliar. "You've been making inquiries about Mr. Vescari's business." Damien's pulse quickened. "Who is this?" "A concerned party. I understand you're looking for someone. A woman." "Elena Whitmore. My fiancée." A pause. "Mr. Vescari has made it clear that the woman is under his protection. Continuing to pursue her would be unwise." Rage flooded Damien's chest. "I don't give a fuck what Vescari thinks. Elena is mine." "Elena Whitmore is no longer your concern." The voice remained calm, almost bored. "This is your only warning, Mr. Cross. Walk away. Forget her. Move on with your life." "Or what? Or you discover why people fear the Vescari name." The line went dead. Damien hurled his phone against the wall, watching it shatter into pieces. Breathing hard, he pressed his palms against his desk, trying to control the fury threatening to consume him. No one took what belonged to Damien Cross. No one. He would find Elena. And when he did, she would learn that running had consequences. That evening, Roman Vescari stood in his private office on the 42nd floor of a building he owned in the financial district. The office was all dark wood and leather, old-world elegance mixed with modern power. Photographs lined one wall, black and white images of his grandfather standing beside politicians and business magnates in 1950s Sicily, his father shaking hands with union leaders, Roman himself cutting ribbons at construction sites. The Vescari family had built an empire over 3 generations, transforming themselves from immigrants with nothing into power brokers whose influence stretched across industries and coastlines. But power always came with blood. Roman poured 2 fingers of scotch and stared out at the city sprawling below. He'd made a decision last night, a decision that violated his own rules about getting involved in matters outside his carefully controlled world. Elena Whitmore was a complication he didn't need, but he couldn't walk away. His phone buzzed. Marco, his head of security. "We have a problem," Marco said without preamble. "Damien Cross is hiring a private investigator, former NYPD, connections in Queens. He's asking about property records, shell companies, any holdings connected to your name." Roman's jaw tightened. "Handle it." "How aggressively?" "Legal pressure first. If that doesn't work, make him understand that pursuing this will cost him more than he's willing to pay." "Understood." Roman ended the call and downed the scotch, feeling the burn slide down his throat. Damien Cross was becoming a problem, the kind that required permanent solutions if warnings went unheeded. He thought about Elena sitting alone in the Tribeca penthouse, probably terrified, probably questioning every decision that brought her to this moment. She reminded him of his sister, Lucia, before her ex-boyfriend had put her in the hospital. The same haunted eyes, the same exhaustion radiating from someone who had spent too long surviving instead of living. Roman had been in Milan when he got the call about Lucia. By the time he flew back to New York, she'd been in ICU for 3 days, broken ribs, fractured skull, internal bleeding. The doctor said she was lucky to be alive. Roman made sure her ex-boyfriend was never found. Some sins required blood payment. The door to his office opened without knocking, the only person who had that privilege. Vincent Caruso entered, Roman's oldest friend and the family's consigliere. Vincent had been with the Vescari since childhood, growing up 3 blocks from Roman in Brooklyn, navigating the same streets, the same violence, the same unspoken rules. "You're playing a dangerous game," Vincent said, pouring himself a drink without invitation. "Getting involved with this woman. She needed help." "People always need help, Roman. You can't save everyone." Roman turned from the window, his dark eyes flat. "I'm not trying to save everyone. Just her." Vincent sighed, settling into one of the leather chairs. Damian Cross has connections. His father sits on 3 corporate boards. His uncle is a federal prosecutor. You embarrass him publicly, you make an enemy. I already have enemies. You have business rivals and territorial disputes, Vincent corrected. This is different. This is personal, and personal makes men stupid. Roman knew Vincent was right, but he also knew that walking away meant abandoning Elena to a fate he'd sworn never to ignore again. I'll handle it, Roman said quietly. Vincent studied him for a long moment. You like her? I don't know her. That's not what I asked. Roman didn't respond. He couldn't explain the pull he felt toward Elena Whitmore, the instinct to protect her that went beyond guilt over his sister, beyond simple decency. Something about her resonated with the parts of himself he usually kept buried beneath layers of calculated violence and old-world honor. Just be careful, Vincent said finally, standing. Men like Damian Cross don't let go easily, and when they finally snap, they burn everything. After Vincent left, Roman sat in the dark office, listening to the city hum beyond the glass. He pulled out his phone and stared at the security feed from the Tribeca penthouse. Elena stood at the window, wrapped in the robe he'd left for her, her silhouette small against the massive cityscape. She looked lost and fragile and utterly alone. Roman made a decision. He grabbed his coat and headed for the door. 30 minutes later, Elena jumped when the doorbell rang. She peered through the peephole and saw Roman standing in the hallway, hands in his pockets, looking somehow less intimidating than he had at Maravento. She opened the door slowly. I wanted to check on you, Roman said. May I come in? Elena stepped aside, suddenly aware of how informal she looked in the oversized robe, her hair unbrushed, no makeup to hide the exhaustion weighing down her features. Roman entered and moved to the kitchen, immediately starting to make coffee with the ease of someone familiar with this space. Did Sophia explain your options? Yes, Elena said, perching on one of the bar stools. I'm going forward with the restraining order. Roman nodded, his expression unreadable. Smart. Legal pressure often works. Often? Not always. Silence stretched between them while the coffee machine hissed and gurgled. Roman pulled 2 mugs from the cabinet, expensive ceramic, heavy in the hand. He poured coffee with surprising care, adding cream without asking how she took it. Elena wrapped her hands around the warm mug, grateful for something to hold. Why are you doing this? Sophia told you about my sister. That's not an answer. Roman leaned against the counter, his dark eyes meeting hers directly. Years ago, I failed someone I loved. I wasn't paying attention. I was too focused on business, on building the empire my father left me, on proving I could be more than just his legacy. By the time I realized what was happening to Lucia, she'd already been destroyed. What happened to the man who hurt her? Roman's expression went cold. He's no longer a concern. Elena's chest tightened. She understood what that meant, understood that Roman Vescari operated in a world where problems disappeared permanently. I don't want Damian dead, she said quietly. I know. That's why we're pursuing legal options. But if that doesn't work? Roman set down his coffee mug with deliberate precision. Then we escalate. But you'll make that decision, Elena, not me. I'm not here to control your choices. The words hit harder than Elena expected. 3 years with Damian had conditioned her to accept that other people made her decisions. Roman offering her autonomy felt almost threatening in its unfamiliarity. I don't know how to do this, she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. I don't know how to be the person who makes choices. Then start small, Roman said. What do you want for dinner? Elena blinked, caught off guard by the mundane question. What? Dinner. Italian. Chinese. I know a place that makes carbonara better than anything you'll find in Rome. Elena's mind went blank. When was the last time someone asked her what she wanted? Italian sounds good. Roman pulled out his phone and made a call, ordering food in rapid Italian that Elena couldn't follow. He moved through the kitchen with quiet confidence, setting plates, finding silverware, opening a bottle of wine that probably cost more than Elena's monthly rent used to. You don't have to do all this, Elena said, watching him. I know. Then why? Roman paused, wine bottle in hand, his expression thoughtful. Because 3 years ago, no one helped my sister. Everyone saw the bruises, the fear, the way she shrank into herself, and no one said a word. I've spent every day since wondering what would have happened if someone had intervened sooner. You're trying to rewrite history. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just trying to do better this time. They ate dinner together at the kitchen island, carbonara that tasted like heaven, crusty bread, wine that warmed Elena's chest and loosened the knots in her shoulders. Roman asked about her life before Damien, and Elena found herself talking about things she'd forgotten, her college dreams of working in advertising, her childhood in Connecticut, her love of terrible reality TV. Roman listened without judgment, occasionally asking questions, never pushing too hard. He told her about growing up in Brooklyn, learning the family business from his father, the weight of carrying a legacy built partially on violence. "Do you regret it?" Elena asked. "The life you inherited?" Roman considered the question seriously. "I regret the necessity of violence, but I don't regret protecting what's mine, or helping people who need protection. Power can be used for terrible things. It can also be used to build shelters for women escaping abuse, fund legal clinics, make sure predators face consequences." "Is that what you do?" "Sometimes, when I'm not terrifying restaurant owners and embarrassing Wall Street princes." Elena laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in longer than she could remember. The sound surprised her. Roman smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face from dangerous to almost gentle. They talked until midnight, the conversation flowing easier than either expected. Roman told her about his favorite places in the city, jazz clubs hidden beneath Manhattan streets, family-owned restaurants in Queens, bookstores in Brooklyn that still smelled like the 1970s. Elena described the marketing campaign she'd once dreamed of creating, the brands she admired, the creative work that used to make her feel alive. When Roman finally stood to leave, Elena felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. "Thank you," she said at the door, "for everything." Roman looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his dark eyes. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we'll start building your life back." After he left, Elena stood in the silent penthouse feeling less alone than she had in years. Across town, Damien Cross made a phone call that would change everything. "Detective Morrison, it's Damien Cross. Yes, from the Harrison merger. Listen, I need a favor." The next 2 weeks moved fast. Elena met with Sophia 3 times, documenting every incident of abuse, every controlling behavior, every threat Damien had ever made. The restraining order was filed and approved within 5 days. Faster than normal, Sophia admitted, because certain judges owed the Vescari family favors. Elena's belongings were retrieved from Damien's apartment by professional movers, accompanied by armed security. Damien hadn't been home, but he'd left destruction behind, her clothes shredded, her laptop smashed, photographs torn apart. The message was clear. "If I can't have you, I'll destroy everything you were." Roman absorbed the news without visible emotion, but Elena noticed his jaw tighten, noticed the way he made a phone call immediately after and spoke in rapid Italian, too quiet for her to hear. That night, Damien's luxury sedan was found with all 4 tires slashed and acid poured across the hood. The war had begun. Elena tried to rebuild her life within the protective bubble Roman had constructed. She started therapy. A woman named Dr. Chen, who specialized in trauma recovery, and asked the kinds of questions that made Elena cry, but also made her feel seen. She reconnected with her younger sister Amy, who had been frozen out during the Damien years. "I knew something was wrong," Amy said during their first phone call, her voice thick with tears. "But you kept saying everything was fine, and I didn't know how to help." "I didn't know how to ask," Elena admitted. Slowly, piece by fragile piece, Elena began remembering who she used to be. But Damien wouldn't let go. The phone calls started in week 3, unknown numbers that Elena answered by mistake before realizing Damien had found ways around the restraining order. He cycled between rage and desperate pleas, sometimes within the same message. "I love you, I need you, you're destroying my life. Come home. You ungrateful bitch, please. I'll change. I swear I'll change. You belong to me." Elena changed her number. Damien showed up at her old office building, waiting outside until security escorted him away. He sent flowers to the Tribeca address, dozens of white roses with cards that said, "You can't hide forever." Roman's response was immediate and calculated. Damien's access to certain clubs vanished overnight. Business deals fell through. His father's company lost contracts with construction firms that had worked with them for decades. Opportunities dried up like water in desert sand. The invisible hand of Roman Vescari's influence pressed down systematically, methodically demonstrating consequences. But it only made Damien more desperate. Elena started noticing the same car parked across from the Tribeca building, a dark SUV with tinted windows. Roman's security noticed too. They ran the plates and traced it back to a private investigation firm. "He's watching you," Roman told her one evening over dinner in the penthouse. They'd fallen into a routine, Roman checking on her most nights, bringing food, talking until late. "The investigator he hired is surveilling this building." Elena's hands trembled around her wine glass. "What do we do?" "I handle it." "How?" Roman's expression went cold. "You don't want to know." "Yes, I do." Elena set down her glass, her green eyes meeting his directly. "I'm tired of being protected like I'm made of glass. If this is my war, I need to know what's happening." Roman studied her for a long moment, seeing something shift in her that hadn't been there before. Strength replacing fear, anger replacing resignation. "The investigator will receive a visit from people who explain that continuing this surveillance will have consequences," Roman said carefully. "Not violent consequences, but professional ones. His license, his reputation, his ability to work in this city, all of it can disappear if he chooses to ignore the warning. And if he doesn't, then we escalate." Elena understood now what living in Roman's world meant. Power didn't always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it whispered through shadows, dismantling lives with phone calls and pressure applied to the right leverage points. "I want to meet him," Elena said suddenly. Roman frowned. "Who?" "Damien. I want to see him one more time, face to face, with you there." "That's a terrible idea." "I need closure," Elena insisted. "I need to look him in the eye and tell him I'm done, that he doesn't own me anymore." "He won't listen, Elena. Men like Damien Cross don't respect words." "Then he'll respect the man standing beside me." Roman exhaled slowly, recognizing the determination in Elena's voice. The same determination his sister had found after months of therapy. The moment she decided to stop being a victim and start being a survivor. "If we do this," Roman said carefully, "it happens on my terms. Public place. Full security. You say what you need to say, and we leave. No negotiations, no second chances." Elena nodded. "Agreed." The meeting was arranged for 2 days later at a coffee shop in Midtown. Neutral ground, public enough to prevent violence, private enough for difficult conversations. Damien arrived 10 minutes early, looking worse than Elena remembered. His eyes were hollow, his expensive suit rumpled, his confidence cracked like cheap paint. He sat alone at a corner table, hands wrapped around a coffee cup, his leg bouncing nervously. Elena and Roman entered together, flanked by 2 security guards who took positions near the door. Every customer in the coffee shop suddenly found reasons to look elsewhere. Damien stood when he saw Elena, his expression cycling through emotions too fast to track: hope, anger, desperation, hatred. "Elena," he breathed, "thank God. I've been trying to reach you. I've been worried sick." "Sit down," Elena said, her voice steady. Damien sat. Roman remained standing behind Elena, his presence a wall of quiet threat. "I came here to tell you something," Elena began, her hands folded on the table. "And I need you to listen without interrupting." Damien nodded eagerly. "Anything. Just tell me what I can do to fix this. I love you, Elena. I'll get help. I'll go to therapy. Whatever you need." "You can't fix this," Elena interrupted, "because you broke something that can't be repaired. For 3 years, you made me believe I was worthless. You convinced me that no one else would ever want me, that I should be grateful you tolerated me. You controlled what I wore, who I spoke to, how I laughed. You made me smaller every single day until I barely recognized myself. I was protecting you." "You were destroying me," Elena said, her voice rising. "And the worst part is that I let you. I believed your lies. I accepted the abuse because you made me think I deserved it." Tears streamed down Damien's face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I love you so much it makes me crazy." "That's not love," Elena said flatly. "Love doesn't control. Love doesn't belittle. Love doesn't leave bruises on the soul even when the body remains unmarked." Damien's expression shifted, desperation morphing into something uglier. Is that what he told you? His eyes flicked to Roman. Did this criminal convince you that I'm the monster? Elena, he's manipulating you. Can't you see that? Roman gave me a choice, Elena said quietly. Something you never did. He's using you. He'll get bored and throw you away like everyone else in his life. Enough! Roman's voice cut through Damien's escalating panic like a blade. Elena said what she came to say. This conversation is over. Damien surged to his feet, his chair scraping loudly. You can't take her from me. She's my fiancée. We're getting married. No, Elena said, pulling off the engagement ring she'd continued wearing out of habit or fear or both. She set it on the table between them. We're not. I'm done, Damien. Stay away from me. Move on with your life. She stood, Roman's hand coming to rest gently on her lower back, supportive, not controlling. Damien's face went red. If I can't have you, no one will. You hear me? I'll make sure that Italian criminal understands what happens when he takes what's mine. The security guards moved forward immediately, but Roman raised a hand to stop them. He leaned down, his face inches from Damien's, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than shouting ever could. Touch her again, threaten her again, even think about her the wrong way. And I will show you exactly why people fear the Vescari name. Do you understand me? Damien went pale. I asked if you understand, Roman repeated, each word precise. Yes, Damien whispered. Roman straightened. Good. Because unlike you, I keep my promises. They left the coffee shop while Damien remained frozen at the table, the engagement ring sitting between his trembling hands like a grenade with the pin pulled. Outside, the city noise rushed back. Traffic, sirens, the endless churn of Manhattan indifferent to their personal wars. Elena took a deep breath, feeling simultaneously lighter and more terrified than she'd ever been. How do you feel? Roman asked. Like I just stepped off a cliff, Elena admitted. Good. Roman's hand found hers, his grip warm and steady. That means you're finally flying instead of falling. But neither of them saw Damien watching through the coffee shop window, his expression gone flat and empty. The kind of emptiness that preceded terrible decisions. 3 days later, everything exploded. Elena returned to the Tribeca penthouse after a therapy session to find her door kicked open. The security guard unconscious in the hallway, blood pooling beneath his head. She froze, her heart stopping. Then Damien stepped out of the penthouse, wild-eyed and carrying a gun. Elena's scream died in her throat. Damien stood in the doorway of the penthouse she'd believed was safe. His designer suit wrinkled and stained, his eyes carrying the hollow wildness of someone who had crossed a line they could never uncross. The gun in his hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline coursing through veins that had spent weeks marinating in obsession and rage. Get inside, Damien said, his voice eerily calm. Now. Elena's legs wouldn't move. Her eyes kept darting to the security guard bleeding on the hallway floor, his chest rising and falling shallowly. Still alive. Barely. I said get inside, Damien's voice cracked, the gun jerking toward her face. Elena stumbled backward into the penthouse, her hands raised instinctively. Damien followed, kicking the damaged door closed behind him. The lock was broken, the frame splintered where he'd forced entry. How did you get past security? Elena's voice came out strangled. Damien laughed, a brittle, unhinged sound that made Elena's skin crawl. You think your criminal boyfriend is the only one with connections? My uncle is a federal prosecutor, Elena. You remember him? The one you met at Christmas? Turns out he has friends. Friends who know how to bypass building security. Friends who owe favors. Elena's mind raced, calculating distances to windows, doors, anything. But Damien blocked the only exit, and they were 42 floors above the street. Damien, please, just put the gun down. We can talk. Talk? Damien's face contorted. I tried talking. I sent you flowers. I called. I apologized. I begged. And you threw it all back in my face for some Italian gangster who's probably fucking half the women in Manhattan. That's not true. Shut up! Damien advanced, closing the distance between them. Elena backed away until her spine hit the kitchen counter. You humiliated me, Elena. You made me look weak in front of people who matter. You destroyed my reputation, my career, my entire life. Roman destroyed your career, Elena shot back, anger momentarily overwhelming fear. Because you wouldn't leave me alone! The slap came fast and vicious, snapping Elena's head sideways. Pain exploded across her cheekbone. She tasted blood where her teeth cut the inside of her mouth. For 3 years, Damien had threatened violence without delivering it. Always the promise hanging over her head, the implication that she was one mistake away from physical consequences. But he'd never actually hit her before. That barrier was gone now. Elena pressed her hand against her burning cheek, her eyes watering from pain and shock. Damien stared at his own hand like it belonged to someone else, breathing hard. "You made me do that," he said quietly. "You always make me do things I don't want to do." Elena's phone buzzed in her pocket. Damien's eyes snapped to the sound. "Give it to me." "Damien!" He aimed the gun directly at her face. "Give it to me." Elena pulled out her phone with shaking hands. The screen showed Roman's name. Damien grabbed it and answered on speaker. "Elena?" Roman's voice carried immediate tension. "Marco just called. Your building's security feed went dark 10 minutes ago. Where are you?" "She's with me," Damien said into the phone, his tone almost cheerful. "Hi, Roman. Or should I call you Mr. Vescari? I never know the proper etiquette when addressing criminals." Silence crackled through the line. Then Roman's voice returned, colder than Elena had ever heard it. "If you hurt her, you'll what? Send your thugs? Too late. I'm already here. And you know what? Your fancy security didn't even slow me down. Turns out when you piss off enough people, they're happy to help someone teach you a lesson." Elena could hear muffled voices in the background on Roman's end, urgent conversations, orders being given. "Damien," Roman said, his voice carefully controlled, "this isn't going to end the way you think. You're holding a gun on a woman in a building surrounded by my people. There's no exit, no escape. The best you can hope for is walking away alive." "I don't want to walk away," Damien replied. "I want what's mine. And you took her from me." "She was never yours." Damien's hand tightened on the gun. "She was mine for 3 years. I built her into something. I took care of her. And then you swoop in like some white knight gangster and convince her I'm the monster?" "You convinced her of that yourself," Roman said flatly. Damien's face went red. He ended the call and threw the phone against the wall, watching it shatter. Then he turned back to Elena, the gun lowering slightly. "Do you love him?" The question landed like a punch. Elena's mind stuttered, trying to process the shift from violence to interrogation. "What?" "Do you love Roman Vescari?" Damien repeated, each word deliberate. "Because if you do, I need to know. I need to understand what I'm competing against." Elena stared at him, at this man who had systematically destroyed her sense of self for 3 years, who now stood in front of her with a gun demanding honesty she'd never been allowed to give. "I don't know," she said truthfully. "Bullshit." "I don't," Elena's voice cracked. "I barely know him, Damien. He helped me escape you, that's all. Whatever you think is happening." "I saw you," Damien interrupted. "At the coffee shop. The way you looked at him. The way he touched you. I saw everything. He was supporting me. That's not love. That's just—" "It's more than you ever gave me," Damien shouted, his composure shattering. Tears streamed down his face, mixing with sweat. "I loved you, Elena. I gave you everything. My time, my money, my name. And you repay me by running to the first man who shows you basic kindness?" "You gave me a cage," Elena said, her own tears falling now. "Not love. You gave me fear dressed up as protection, control disguised as care. That's not love, Damien. It never was." "I was protecting you from yourself." Damien's voice rose to a scream. "You were nothing when I met you, some stupid marketing assistant with cheap clothes and stupid dreams. I made you better. I gave you access to a world you never could have reached alone." "You made me hate myself," Elena whispered. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Damien went very still. "What did you say?" "You made me hate myself," Elena repeated, louder now. "Every day. Every single day you found new ways to make me feel worthless. And eventually, I believed you. That's what you wanted, isn't it? For me to believe I was nothing without you?" "That's not true." "It's exactly true." Elena's voice climbed to match his, 3 years of swallowed words finally erupting. "You wanted me broken so I'd never leave. You wanted me dependent so I'd always need you. But you know what the sick part is? It almost worked. I almost stayed. I almost married you, even though every instinct screamed that you were killing me slowly. I never laid a hand on you before today. You didn't have to, Elena screamed back. You destroyed me without ever leaving a mark. That's what made you so good at it. Damien flinched like she'd struck him. For a moment, one brief flickering moment, something almost like awareness crossed his face. Then it vanished, replaced by the hollow determination of a man who had already decided how this ended. Then I'll fix it, he said quietly. We'll start over. I'll do better this time. There is no this time, Damien. It's over. No. Damien shook his head violently. No, you don't get to decide that. You're mine. You'll always be mine. The sound of footsteps thundered in the hallway outside. Heavy boots. Multiple voices. Security had arrived. Damien heard it too. His eyes went wide, panicked. He grabbed Elena by the arm, dragging her toward the bedroom in the back of the penthouse. Elena struggled, but he pressed the gun against her temple. Move, he hissed. They entered the bedroom, the one Elena had been sleeping in for weeks, the one that had felt like the first safe space she'd known in years. Damien shoved her onto the bed and locked the door behind them. Damien Cross, a voice boomed from the living room. NYPD, come out with your hands visible. Elena's chest seized. Police. How had police arrived before Roman's people? Your boyfriend must have called them, Damien muttered, pacing like a caged animal. Typical. Can't handle his own problems, needs the law to do it. Damien, please, Elena tried, her voice shaking. It's over. There's no way out. Just surrender. Put the gun down. We can say you were having a breakdown, that you need help. I don't need help, Damien shouted. I need you. Pounding rattled the bedroom door. Mr. Cross, this is Detective Morrison. Open this door immediately. Damien's head snapped toward the sound. Morrison, he repeated, a strange smile crossing his face. Uncle pulled strings, got me protection. Elena's blood ran cold. What? My uncle, Damien said, his words tumbling out faster now. He made calls, made sure the right people responded, made sure I'd have a chance to explain myself before Vescari's people could make me disappear. The bedroom door shook under heavy impacts, someone trying to break it down. But they won't listen! Damien's voice climbed higher, hysteria creeping in. No one listens anymore. Everyone's on Vescari's payroll. The judges, the lawyers, even the fucking cops. How do I compete with that? You don't, Elena said desperately. You don't compete. You walk away. You let me go. You save yourself. Damien looked at her for a long moment, his expression cycling through emotions too fast to track. Then he sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, the gun dangling loosely from his hand. I can't, he whispered. I can't let you go. Without you, I'm nothing. The bedroom door exploded inward. 2 NYPD officers stormed in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Damien's hand jerked up with the gun. Elena threw herself forward, knocking his arm sideways just as he pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. The bullet punched through the window, spiderweb cracks spreading across reinforced glass. Officers swarmed Damien, forcing him face down on the carpet, wrenching the gun from his grip. Elena scrambled backward off the bed, her ears ringing, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. You're safe, one of the officers said, reaching for her. Ma'am, you're safe now. But Elena couldn't hear him over the ringing in her ears and the sound of Damien sobbing into the carpet as they cuffed his hands behind his back. Elena, Damien screamed, fighting against the officers holding him down. Elena, please, don't let them take me. I love you. I'm sorry, please. They dragged him out of the bedroom, still screaming her name. Elena sank to the floor, her entire body shaking violently. She pressed her hands against her ears, trying to block out the sound of Damien's voice, echoing through the penthouse, through her mind, through every memory of the last 3 years. Ms. Whitmore? A detective crouched in front of her. Older man, gray hair, weathered face carrying the weight of too many crime scenes. I'm Detective Morrison. Can you tell me what happened? Elena stared at him blankly. Morrison. The name Damien had mentioned. The detective his uncle knew. Did you help him? The words tumbled out before Elena could stop them. Did you help him get past security? Morrison's expression remained neutral. Ma'am, I need you to calm down. You've been through a traumatic... Answer the question. Elena's voice cracked. Damien said his uncle made calls. He said you were here to protect him. Did you help him break into this building? Morrison's jaw tightened. I don't know what Mr. Cross told you, but Detective Morrison. The new voice cut through the room like a blade. Roman Vescari stood in the doorway, flanked by two men in expensive suits who radiated lawyer energy. Roman's face was carved from stone, his dark eyes flat and dangerous. Mr. Vescari, Morrison said, standing slowly, this is a police investigation. I need to speak with Elena, Roman interrupted, his voice deadly calm. Alone. That's not protocol. Now. Something in Roman's tone made Morrison step back. The detective glanced at his partner, some silent communication passing between them. Then they retreated to the living room. Roman crossed the bedroom in 3 strides and dropped to his knees in front of Elena. His hands came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing gently over the angry red mark where Damien had hit her. Are you hurt? Roman's voice was quiet, controlled, but Elena could see the fury burning beneath the surface. I'm okay, she whispered. That's not what I asked. Elena's composure cracked. She fell forward into Roman's arms, sobbing against his chest while he held her with surprising gentleness for someone whose reputation was built on violence. He got in, Elena choked out between sobs. He walked right past your security. He hurt your guard. He had a gun. He said his uncle helped him. I know, Roman murmured into her hair. We're handling it. How did he get in? Elena pulled back, looking up at Roman through tears. You promised I was safe. You said... I failed you, Roman said bluntly, and that failure almost cost your life. The honesty in his voice, the rawness, cut through Elena's panic. She saw something in Roman's eyes she hadn't seen before. Not just anger, not just protectiveness. Guilt. This isn't your fault, Elena said. Yes, it is. I underestimated how far Damien would go. I assumed institutional pressure would be enough. I was wrong. Roman's hands tightened slightly on her shoulders. But I won't make that mistake again. The way he said it made Elena's stomach turn. What are you going to do? What I should have done from the beginning. Roman, he pointed a gun at your face, Elena. He hit you. He terrorized you in a place I told you was safe. There are consequences for that. He's going to prison, Elena said desperately. They'll charge him with assault, breaking and entering, attempted kidnapping. That's consequence enough. Roman's expression didn't change. You know it's not. Elena did know. She'd seen enough of Roman's world these past weeks to understand that legal consequences and actual consequences operated on different planes. Prison meant lawyers, appeals, eventual release. Roman's version of consequence was permanent. Don't kill him, Elena whispered. Why? The question wasn't mocking. Roman genuinely wanted to understand. Why do you still protect him after everything he's done? Because if you kill him, you become what people think you are, Elena said. And I don't believe that's who you really are. Roman stared at her for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression, not softening exactly, but recalibrating. You're asking me to show mercy to someone who showed you none. I'm asking you not to destroy yourself to protect me. Elena. Roman's voice dropped lower. Destroying men like Damien Cross is what I do. It's who I am. You can't separate the protection from the violence. Yes, you can, Elena insisted. You already have. You helped me without asking for anything. You gave me choices instead of demands. That's not violence, Roman. That's the man you could be if you wanted. Before Roman could respond, voices rose sharply in the living room. Footsteps approached fast. Vincent Caruso appeared in the doorway, his expression tight. We have a problem. Roman stood immediately. What kind? Federal kind. FBI just arrived. They're demanding to speak with Elena about her allegations against Detective Morrison. Elena's mind spun. What allegations? The building security footage, Vincent interrupted, looking at Elena. It shows Morrison using a police override code to disable the entrance scanners 30 minutes before Damien arrived. Someone sent that footage to the FBI. Roman's expression went dark. Who? Anonymous tip. But whoever it was, they burned Morrison and his partner both. FBI's investigating whether this was conspiracy to commit kidnapping by law enforcement. Elena's breath caught. Morrison had helped Damien, actually helped him breach security, hurt the guard, get to her. My uncle, Elena whispered, remembering Damien's words. Damien said his uncle is a federal prosecutor. He made calls, got protection. Not protection, Vincent corrected grimly. Access. Morrison owes favors to Damien's uncle. Probably agreed to delay response time, give Damien a window, didn't expect it to go this far south. Roman's jaw worked silently. Elena could see calculations running behind his eyes, legal angles, political pressure points, ways to turn the situation into leverage. This changes things, Roman said finally. How? Elena asked. Because now Damien's uncle is exposed, and Morrison just became a liability instead of an asset. Roman looked at Vincent. Contact the FBI. Tell them Elena will provide a full statement about Morrison's involvement, everything Damien said, everything she witnessed. Roman, Vincent started. Now, Roman cut him off. And make sure they understand we're cooperating fully. I want Morrison's badge and his partners. I want Damien's uncle investigated for corruption, and I want it all public. Vincent nodded and left quickly. Elena stared at Roman, understanding dawning. You're using this. I'm protecting you, Roman corrected, by making sure everyone who enabled Damien faces consequences, by sending a message that you don't get to hurt people under my protection without losing everything. That's not protection, that's vengeance. Sometimes they're the same thing. Elena opened her mouth to argue, but exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Her legs went weak. Roman caught her before she collapsed, lifting her easily and carrying her to the bed. Rest, he said quietly. FBI can wait a few hours, so can everything else. I can't sleep, Elena whispered, even as her eyes drooped. Every time I close my eyes, I see him. The gun. His face. Roman sat on the edge of the bed, his hand finding hers. Then don't close your eyes yet. Just breathe. I'm not leaving. You have to. The FBI, the investigation, Vincent handles it. I stay here. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to insist he had more important things to do than babysit a traumatized woman. But the weight of the day crushed down on her, and she couldn't find the energy. Roman? Yes? Thank you for not killing him. Roman's expression flickered. I haven't decided yet. Yes, you have, or you would have already done it. Roman didn't confirm or deny. He just sat there, holding her hand, his presence solid and steady, while Elena's world continued fracturing around them. Hours later, after FBI interviews and crime scene processing and endless questions, Elena sat alone in a different safe house, this one deeper into Brooklyn, guarded by more men carrying more weapons. Roman had insisted on the move. The Tribeca penthouse was compromised, he said, no longer secure. Elena understood what he meant. She would never feel safe there again. Sophia arrived late that night with legal documents and a bottle of wine. Damien's been charged with assault, kidnapping, breaking and entering, and possession of an illegal firearm, she reported, pouring 2 generous glasses. His bail hearing is tomorrow. We're pushing for remand. Will it work? Elena asked, her voice hoarse from hours of giving statements. With the FBI investigation into Morrison's involvement? Yes. Judge won't risk public perception of releasing someone with law enforcement connections who used them to stalk an ex. Elena nodded numbly. Sophia studied her for a moment. How are you holding up? I don't know, Elena admitted. I keep thinking about what he said, that I made him hit me, that I ruined his life. Elena, I know it's not true, Elena interrupted. Rationally, I know. But 3 years of conditioning doesn't disappear because one night got violent. Sophia set down her wine glass and looked at Elena directly. Can I tell you something about Roman? Elena nodded. His sister, Lucia, blamed herself for months after her ex put her in the hospital. Said she must have provoked him, must have done something to deserve it. We couldn't break through that thinking. Not her therapist, not her friends, not Roman. You know what finally did it? What? Time. And realizing that monsters don't need reasons. They just need targets. Sophia paused. Damien Cross is a monster, Elena, and you were his target. Nothing you did caused that. Nothing you could have done would have prevented it. He chose violence. That's on him, not you. Tears burned Elena's eyes again. She'd cried more in the past 8 hours than the entire previous year. I just want it to be over. It will be, Sophia promised. Damien's looking at 5 to 10 years minimum with these charges. Add the FBI investigation, potential corruption charges against his uncle, Morrison's involvement. The Cross family is about to be buried. They won't have resources or energy to come after you. And Roman, Sophia's expression shifted. What about him? He wanted to kill Damien. I saw it in his eyes. But he didn't. Because I asked him not to. Elena looked at Sophia directly. How long before he stops listening to what I ask? Sophia was quiet for a long moment. Roman Vescari is many things. Dangerous, yes, ruthless when necessary. But he's also loyal to the people he protects. And he keeps his word. Even if keeping that word costs him? Especially then. Elena wasn't sure she believed that. Men like Roman Vescari, men who built empires on violence, didn't suddenly become gentle because one woman asked them to. Eventually, his nature would win out. Eventually, he would do what men like him always did. Across the city, Roman Vescari stood in an undisclosed location, staring at Damien Cross through reinforced glass. Damien sat handcuffed to a metal table in an interrogation room, his expensive suit torn, his face bruised from where he'd fought the arresting officers. He looked smaller now, broken in ways that prison would only amplify. Roman had arranged this viewing through connections at the precinct, the kind of connections that bent rules but didn't break them. He stood in darkness, watching the man who had terrorized Elena, calculating whether mercy was weakness or strength. Vincent appeared beside him. FBI confirmed Morrison's involvement. They're building a case. Damien's uncle will probably resign before they can file formal charges. Good, Roman said flatly. Elena's statement is strong. Combined with the evidence, Damien's looking at serious time. Roman nodded, still watching through the glass. So what are we doing here? Vincent asked quietly. Because if you're planning what I think you're planning, it's a mistake. He pointed a gun at her face. And he's going to prison for it. Mission accomplished. Roman's jaw tightened. Prison isn't permanent. It's permanent enough. 5 to 10 years minimum, Roman. By the time he gets out, Elena will have rebuilt her entire life. He'll be a memory. Let the system handle this. The system let Morrison help him break into a secure building. And the system is now destroying Morrison for it, Vincent countered. You taught me that patience is power. Don't throw that away because you're angry. I'm not angry, Roman said quietly. I'm furious. Vincent sighed. Elena asked you not to kill him. I know what Elena asked. And? Roman was silent for a long moment, watching Damien sob into his handcuffed hands. Watching this man, this pathetic broken man, who had nearly destroyed someone Roman was beginning to care about more than was wise. And, Roman said finally, I'm trying to be someone worth her asking. Vincent exhaled slowly. So we're walking away? We're walking away from this, Roman clarified. But if he comes near her again after release, if he so much as thinks about her, there won't be a conversation. There won't be a warning. There will only be consequences. Fair enough? They turned to leave, Roman casting one last glance at Damien Cross through the glass. Part of him wanted to walk through that door and deliver the kind of justice courts never provided. But another part, a newer, less familiar part, remembered Elena's words. Don't destroy yourself to protect me. Maybe she was right. Maybe showing restraint required more strength than delivering violence. Or maybe he was just delaying the inevitable. Time would tell. As they exited the precinct, Vincent's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned, then showed Roman the screen. News alert. Federal investigation launched into alleged police corruption ring. Connected to Cross family. Multiple officers under review. Roman allowed himself a small, cold smile. Mercy didn't mean forgiveness. It just meant choosing a different kind of weapon. 3 months passed like watching ice melt. Slow, inevitable, leaving nothing behind but cold water and the memory of what used to be solid. Damien Cross remained in Rikers awaiting trial. His bail had been denied after the FBI's corruption investigation expanded to include not just Detective Morrison, but 6 other officers connected to his uncle's network. The media devoured the story. Wealthy prosecutor's nephew uses law enforcement connections to stalk ex-fiancée. Corruption exposed. Justice system eating itself alive on primetime television. The Cross family crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny. Damien's uncle resigned quietly, citing health concerns that everyone knew meant legal exposure. Job offers dried up, social circles closed. The empire of respectability they'd built over generations turned to ash in weeks. Elena should have felt vindicated. Instead, she felt hollow. She'd moved into a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, Roman's property, though he insisted it was hers to use as long as she needed. The neighborhood was quiet, tree-lined, far enough from Manhattan's chaos that she could breathe without feeling Damien's ghost choking her. Security remained tight. Armed guards rotated shifts. Cameras covered every angle. Roman had built an invisible fortress around her, and Elena lived inside it like a bird in a gilded cage, safe but still trapped. She threw herself into rebuilding. Therapy 3 times a week with Dr. Chen, reconnecting with her sister Amy, who visited every Sunday with takeout and stories about her 2 kids. Elena even started sketching out ideas for the marketing career she'd abandoned when Damien convinced her she wasn't talented enough to succeed. But at night, when the brownstone went quiet and the security lights cast shadows that moved wrong, Elena still woke up screaming. Roman visited most evenings, usually bringing food and staying until she fell asleep. They never discussed what was growing between them, the gravitational pull that made his absence feel heavier than his presence. It existed in the spaces between words, in the way his hand found hers without thinking, and how her breathing steadied when he walked through the door. Elena knew she was falling in love with him. She also knew it was probably the worst decision she could make. On a Tuesday night in late autumn, Roman arrived at the brownstone carrying Thai food and wearing an expression that Elena had learned to recognize, the one that meant something bad had happened, and he was calculating how much to tell her. "What is it?" Elena asked immediately, taking the food bags from his hands. Roman shrugged off his coat, his movements precise and controlled. Damien's trial date got moved up. 3 weeks from now. Elena's stomach dropped. Why? Prosecutors pushing for a quick resolution before the FBI investigation gets messier. They want him convicted before more police corruption details go public. Roman followed her into the kitchen, watching her unpack containers with hands that trembled slightly. Sophia says it's good news. Fast trial means less time for his lawyers to build a defense. But? Roman was quiet for a moment. But it also means you'll have to testify. In detail. In front of Damien. Elena's hand stilled on a container of pad thai. She'd known this was coming. Sophia had prepared her for months. But knowing and experiencing were different countries separated by an ocean of dread. Okay, Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. I can do that. You don't have to, Roman said quietly. There's enough evidence without your testimony. The security footage, Morrison's involvement, the gun, the assault on my guard. Sophia can argue for your statement to be read without you present. No. Elena looked up at him. I need to do this. I need to look at him and say what he did. Otherwise, her voice cracked. Otherwise, he still wins. He still owns that piece of me. Roman crossed the kitchen and pulled her into his arms without asking permission. Elena folded into his chest, breathing in the scent of expensive cologne and something darker underneath. Gun oil, maybe, or the residue of whatever business he'd handled before arriving. I'll be there, Roman murmured into her hair. Every day. Every minute. You won't face him alone. I know. They stood like that for a long moment, Elena's cheek pressed against Roman's heartbeat, steady and strong beneath Italian wool. She wondered what it said about her that the most dangerous man she'd ever met made her feel safest. Roman? Elena pulled back slightly, looking up at him. After the trial, after he's convicted, what happens to us? Roman's dark eyes searched her face. What do you want to happen? I don't know, Elena struggled for words. I don't know how to be with someone without it being about control or fear or damage. I don't know if I'm falling in love with you or just trauma bonding with the person who saved me. Does it matter which one it is? Yes, Elena said firmly, because I won't let myself become dependent on you the way I was on Damien. I won't trade one cage for another. I'm not offering you a cage, Roman said quietly. I'm offering you the keys to leave whenever you want. And if I never want to leave? Roman's expression softened in a way that made him look younger, less weighted by violence and legacy. Then I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret staying. Elena rose on her toes and kissed him, tentative at first, testing the waters of something that felt simultaneously right and terrifying. Roman responded carefully, his hands gentle on her face, giving her control over the moment. When they broke apart, Elena's chest felt tight with emotions she couldn't name. "I'm not ready," she whispered. "I know, but I want to be." "Then we wait," Roman said simply, "however long it takes." The trial began on a gray November morning when the sky threatened snow, and the courthouse steps were packed with media vans and reporters shouting questions at anyone who passed. Elena arrived through a side entrance, flanked by Sophia and two of Roman's security guards, avoiding the cameras that would broadcast her face across every news channel in New York. Inside, the courtroom smelled like old wood and recycled air, and the fierce sweat of people waiting for justice that might never arrive. Elena took her seat behind the prosecution table, Roman sliding in beside her. His presence drew stares from court officials and jurors being seated. Everyone recognized the Vescari name, and Roman's appearance alongside the victim sent a clear message about where his loyalties lay. Damien was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung wrong on his frame. He'd lost weight in Rikers, muscle replaced by the kind of hollow gauntness that came from not eating, not sleeping, slowly being eroded by an environment designed to break people. His eyes found Elena immediately, and something flickered across his face too fast to identify. Regret? Rage? Longing? Elena forced herself not to look away. This was her moment to reclaim the power Damien had stolen. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of her fear. The trial moved through its opening phases with procedural precision. Prosecutors laid out the case methodically. Security footage showing Morrison's override code being used. Testimony from the injured guard, ballistics on the gun Damien had carried, phone records proving obsessive contact despite the restraining order. Damien's lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in defending wealthy criminals, tried to paint a narrative of mental breakdown, temporary insanity brought on by the trauma of losing his fiancée to a known criminal figure. She implied that Roman Vescari had orchestrated Elena's estrangement, that Damien was a victim of manipulation by organized crime. Sophia demolished that defense on cross-examination, producing 3 years of documented abuse, texts where Damien threatened Elena, emails where he belittled her, witness statements from Elena's co-workers who had seen bruises Elena explained away as clumsiness. By day 3, the prosecution was winning decisively. Then Elena was called to testify. She walked to the witness stand on legs that felt disconnected from her body, her heart hammering so hard she could hear it in her ears. The bailiff swore her in, and Elena placed her hand on the Bible, a book whose presence felt ironic given everything she'd survived. Sophia approached with practiced calm. "Ms. Whitmore, can you describe your relationship with the defendant?" Elena took a breath and looked directly at Damien. "We dated for 3 years. He proposed 14 months ago. I said yes because by then I was too afraid to say no." "Objection," Patricia Chen called, speculation about her own mental state. "Overruled," Judge Martinez said. "The witness can describe her experience." Sophia continued. "What made you afraid to refuse?" "Because Damien controlled every aspect of my life," Elena said, her voice growing stronger. "What I wore, who I spoke to, where I went. He isolated me from family and friends. He criticized me constantly, my appearance, my intelligence, my worth. And he made it clear that leaving would have consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "He never specified. That was the point. The threat was always hanging there, undefined, which made it more terrifying than any specific violence." Damien's face contorted. His lawyer placed a hand on his arm, whispering urgently. Sophia walked Elena through the relationship, the gradual erosion of her autonomy, the way Damien weaponized love into control. Elena described Marevento, Roman's intervention, the weeks of escalating harassment after she left. Then they reached the day Damien broke into the Tribeca penthouse. "Can you describe what happened when you encountered the defendant?" Sophia asked gently. Elena's hands clenched in her lap. She could feel Damien staring at her, could feel the weight of his attention like insects crawling on her skin. But she kept talking. He was waiting inside the apartment. He'd hurt the security guard, knocked him unconscious. He had a gun. He forced me inside and... Elena's voice wavered. He hit me. For the first time in 3 years, he actually hit me. Why do you think he chose that moment to escalate to physical violence? Because he'd already lost everything else. His reputation, his career, his control over me. Violence was all he had left. Patricia Chen approached for cross-examination with the predatory focus of someone who specialized in dismantling victims' credibility. Ms. Whitmore, you claim my client controlled you, but you had opportunities to leave, didn't you? You worked. You had a phone. You could have called for help any time. I was conditioned not to, Elena said evenly. That's what abuse does. It makes you believe leaving is impossible. Or perhaps, Patricia suggested, you enjoyed the lifestyle Mr. Cross provided? The expensive dinners, the luxury apartment, the access to high society. And when you met someone wealthier and more powerful, she gestured toward Roman in the gallery, you decided to upgrade. Objection! Sophia's voice cracked like a whip. Counsel is attacking the victim's character, Sum. I'll allow it, Judge Martinez interrupted. But Mrs. Chen, tread carefully. Patricia turned back to Elena. Isn't it true that you began a romantic relationship with Mr. Vescari immediately after leaving my client? Elena's chest tightened. No. Roman offered protection, nothing more. Protection. Patricia's tone dripped skepticism. Mr. Vescari is known for his connections to organized crime. Did he threaten my client on your behalf? He warned Damien to leave me alone. By destroying his career, by using his criminal connections to pressure business associates, and... Objection, Sophia cut in. Roman Vescari is not on trial here. Sustained, Judge Martinez said. Ms. Chen, focus on the defendant's actions. Patricia shifted tactics. Ms. Whitmore, when my client arrived at the penthouse that day, did he immediately threaten you with the gun? Elena hesitated, remembering the sequence of events. Not immediately. In fact, he tried to talk to you first, didn't he? Tried to explain how devastated he was by your departure? He was obsessed. Yes or no, Ms. Whitmore? Did he attempt conversation before violence? Yes, Elena admitted. And you escalated the situation by refusing to listen, by throwing his love back in his face. That's not... You told him you hated yourself because of him. Those were your words, weren't they? Elena's breath caught. They'd pulled that from the police report. Her statement about what she'd said to Damien before the police arrived. Yes, Elena whispered. So you provoked him. You knew he was unstable, knew he was armed, and you chose to antagonize rather than de-escalate. That's not fair. Elena's voice broke. Objection! Sophia was on her feet. This is victim-blaming and completely inappropriate. Your Honor, Patricia interrupted smoothly. I'm simply establishing that Ms. Whitmore's choices contributed to... Enough! Judge Martinez's voice cut through the chaos. Ms. Chen, I'm warning you. One more line like that and I'll hold you in contempt. Patricia smiled thinly. No further questions. Elena stumbled back to her seat, tears streaming down her face. Roman's hand found hers immediately, squeezing hard enough to ground her. You did well, he murmured. I made it worse, Elena choked out. She made me sound like I wanted this to happen. She's desperate. That means we're winning. But Elena didn't feel like winning. She felt like she'd been gutted and displayed for public consumption, every wound reopened and examined by strangers who would never understand what it felt like to be slowly erased by someone who claimed to love you. The trial continued for another week. Expert witnesses testified about patterns of domestic abuse. The injured security guard described Damien's attack cold, calculated, brutal. Morrison took the stand under immunity and admitted to disabling the building's security systems at the request of Damien's uncle, who had promised career advancement in exchange for the favor, Shims. The FBI agent investigating the corruption ring testified that Morrison's cooperation had exposed a network of officers who provided illegal services to wealthy clients. The Cross family name was now synonymous with institutional corruption. By the final day of testimony, Damien looked like a ghost, pale, hollow-eyed, barely present. His lawyer had done her best, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury would almost certainly convict. Sophia gave her closing argument with surgical precision. The defendant claims he loved Elena Whitmore, but love doesn't control. Love doesn't isolate. Love doesn't show up at your home with a gun and terror in your eyes. Damian Cross didn't love Elena Whitmore. He owned her. And when she reclaimed ownership of her own life, he tried to destroy her for it. That's not love. That's possession. And possession, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is a crime. Patricia Chen's closing was equally sharp, focusing on reasonable doubt, on Roman Vescari's influence, on the possibility that Elena had manipulated events to destroy an innocent man with the help of organized crime. It was a desperate argument, and everyone in the courtroom knew it. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They returned with a verdict just after 8 p.m., when the courthouse had gone quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the shuffle of people taking their seats. Elena sat between Sophia and Roman, her hands clenched so tightly her nails drew blood from her palms. Damian stood as the verdict was read, his expression blank. On the charge of assault in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. Elena's breath hitched. On the charge of burglary in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. Roman's hand tightened on hers. On the charge of kidnapping in the second degree, we find the defendant guilty. Damian's legs buckled slightly. His lawyer caught his arm. The judge continued through every count, 8 in total, 8 guilty verdicts that would put Damian behind bars for anywhere from 7 to 15 years, depending on sentencing. When it was over, Damian was led away in handcuffs. He looked back once, his eyes finding Elena's across the courtroom. She expected to see hatred, expected rage or blame, or the hollow emptiness of a man who had lost everything. Instead, she saw something worse. Resignation. Like he'd always known this was how it would end. Like prison was just another cage in a life built from bars he'd constructed himself. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed immediately. Sophia handled the statement, brief, professional, thanking the jury and the prosecution team. Roman security formed a barrier around Elena, guiding her toward the waiting car. But before they reached it, someone shoved through the crowd. A woman in her 50s, well-dressed, face red with fury. Damian's mother. "You destroyed my son!" she screamed, lunging toward Elena. Security caught her, but her voice carried. "You lying bitch! You seduced him and then you destroyed him. My boy is not a criminal. He loved you!" Elena froze, the words hitting like physical blows. Roman stepped between them immediately, his presence ending the confrontation before it could escalate. "Get her out of here," he told security, his voice flat and dangerous. Damian's mother was escorted away, still screaming, her husband, pale, silent, trailing behind looking like he'd aged 20 years and 3 months. The car ride back to Brooklyn was silent, except for the sound of Elena's ragged breathing. She stared out the window, watching the city blur past, feeling nothing and everything simultaneously. "It's over," Roman said quietly. "He's going to prison. You're safe now." "Am I?" Elena's voice sounded hollow. "Because his mother just blamed me for everything, and part of me believes her. Part of me thinks I could have prevented all of this if I just... Stop." Roman's voice was sharp enough to cut. "Don't do that. Don't take responsibility for his choices. That's what abusers want. They want you to believe their violence is your fault." "But what if..." "There is no what if," Roman interrupted. "Damian Cross made his choices. You survived them. That's all that matters." Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to feel the relief of justice served and danger past. But all she felt was exhausted. They reached the Brooklyn brownstone just after midnight. Roman walked her to the door, security peeling off to their positions around the property. "Stay," Elena said before he could leave. "Tonight. I don't want to be alone." Roman studied her face for a long moment. "Are you sure?" "No," Elena admitted, "but I'm asking anyway." They went inside together, the brownstone quiet and dark except for ambient light filtering through curtains. Elena collapsed onto the couch, every muscle in her body suddenly going slack with release. Roman sat beside her, close but not crowding. "What do you need?" Elena didn't answer with words. She turned and kissed him, harder than before, more desperate, searching for something in his response that she couldn't name. Roman kissed her back with careful intensity, his hands coming up to frame her face, controlling the pace so it didn't spin into something neither of them was ready for. When they broke apart, Elena was crying. "I don't know how to feel," she admitted through tears. "I won. He's going to prison. Justice happened. So why do I feel like I lost something anyway?" "Because justice doesn't erase trauma," Roman said quietly. "It just gives you space to start healing." Elena pressed her face against his chest, letting herself break apart in a way she hadn't allowed during the trial. Roman held her while she sobbed, ugly, wrenching sounds that came from somewhere deep and wounded. Hours later, they ended up in Elena's bed, not having sex, just existing in the same space. Elena lay with her head on Roman's chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling safer than she had in months. "What happens now?" she whispered into the darkness. "Now you heal," Roman said, "and I help however I can. And then? Then you decide what kind of life you want and whether I'm part of it." Elena was quiet for a long moment. "I'm scared of wanting you." "Why?" "Because wanting led me to Damien. Wanting made me ignore every red flag until it was too late." Roman's hand moved through her hair gently. "I'm not Damien. I know. But what if I can't tell the difference? What if my judgment is too broken to trust?" "Then we take it slow," Roman said. "And if you ever feel like I'm becoming what he was, you leave. No questions, no consequences. Just leave." "You'd let me go that easily?" "Easily? No. But I would let you go, because keeping you against your will would make me exactly what I'm trying not to be." Elena closed her eyes, feeling something loosen in her chest, some knot of fear that had been tied so tightly for so long. Maybe healing was possible. Maybe trust could be rebuilt. Maybe love didn't have to be synonymous with pain. But 3 days later, everything changed. Sophia called at 2 a.m., her voice tense and urgent. "Turn on the news. Channel 7. Now!" Elena fumbled for the remote, her heart already racing. The television flickered to life, showing a breaking news banner. "Breaking, convicted domestic abuser. Damien Cross injured in prison attack. Condition critical." The news anchor's voice was professionally concerned. "Sources say Cross was assaulted by 3 inmates earlier tonight at Rikers Island. He's been transported to Bellevue Hospital with life-threatening injuries. Details are still emerging about what provoked the attack." Elena's phone slipped from her hand. Roman appeared in the doorway of her bedroom moments later, fully dressed despite the hour. His expression was carefully neutral. "Did you?" Elena couldn't finish the question. "No," Roman said flatly. "I gave you my word." "Then who?" Roman was silent for a beat too long. "Roman," Elena's voice rose. "Who did this?" "I don't know," Roman said, but his eyes said differently. "But I'll find out." Elena stared at the television screen showing ambulance lights and police cordoning off the hospital entrance where Damien had been taken. She should have felt horror. She should have felt guilt. Instead, she felt something cold and dark and dangerous settling into her chest. Relief. And that terrified her more than anything else. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and desperation, that particular blend of chemical cleanliness trying to mask the rot underneath. Elena stood in the corridor outside Bellevue's intensive care unit at 4 a.m., her arms wrapped around herself despite the overheated air, staring at the door behind which Damien Cross lay unconscious and broken. She hadn't planned to come here. Roman had tried to stop her, his voice tight with controlled fury as she dressed and called for a car. "This is a mistake," he'd said. "Whatever happened to him, you don't owe him your presence." But Elena couldn't explain the pull drawing her here. Some dark need to see with her own eyes what violence looked like when it wore Damien's face instead of hers. Sophia arrived 20 minutes later, still in pajamas under her coat, her hair uncombed and her expression fierce. "The hospital called me as his attorney of record," she explained, handing Elena coffee that had gone lukewarm during the drive. "He's been asking for you." Elena's stomach turned. "Is he going to die?" "The doctors aren't sure. Fractured skull, internal bleeding, broken ribs. 3 inmates jumped him in the common area. Security footage shows it was coordinated. They knew exactly where to hit to cause maximum damage without immediate fatality." "Who were they?" Sophia's expression went carefully neutral. That's being investigated, which meant Sophia knew and wasn't sane, which meant Roman probably knew too. Can I see him? Elena asked, the words tasting like ash. Are you sure that's yet? I need to. Sophia studied her for a long moment, then nodded. 5 minutes, and I'm coming with you. They walked through the ICU together, past beds containing the broken bodies of people who had run out of luck, or time, or both. Damien occupied a corner unit, separated from the others by a curtain that did nothing to block the sound of machines breathing for him. He looked small against the white sheets. Tubes ran from his arms and nose, bandages covered half his head. Bruises painted his face in shades of purple and yellow that would have been beautiful if they weren't evidence of systematic destruction. Elena stood at the foot of his bed, feeling nothing and everything simultaneously. He regained consciousness about an hour ago, a nurse said quietly from the doorway. He's been drifting in and out. The pain medication makes him confused. As if responding to her words, Damien's eyes fluttered open. They were glassy, unfocused, but they found Elena's face with the instinct of someone who had spent 3 years tracking her every movement. Elena, he whispered, the words slurred by swollen lips. You came. Elena forced herself to step closer. Sophia remained at the door, a silent guardian. The hospital called my lawyer, Elena said, her voice flat. She told me what happened. I'm sorry. Tears leaked from the corners of Damien's eyes. For everything. I'm so sorry. Elena studied his broken face, searching for manipulation, for the calculated performance that had defined their entire relationship. But all she saw was pain, physical and something deeper, the kind that came from finally understanding you'd destroyed the only thing that ever mattered. Did you know them? Elena asked. The men who attacked you. Damien's eyes drifted closed. No, they said someone paid them. Said I needed to learn what happens to men who hurt women. Elena's chest tightened. She didn't need to ask who had orchestrated this. The message was clear as daylight through hospital windows. I deserved it, Damien whispered. I know that now. I deserved all of it. No one deserves this, Elena said quietly, surprising herself with the truth of it. What you did to me was unforgivable. But this, she gestured to his broken body, this doesn't balance anything. Damien opened his eyes again, something like clarity breaking through the medication. Then what does? Elena was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the 3 years she'd spent shrinking herself to survive, the months since spent rebuilding from rubble. Nothing balances it. You can't undo what happened. You can only learn to live with what you became. I loved you, Damien said, his voice breaking. I still love you. No, Elena replied firmly. You loved owning me. There's a difference. Please. Damien tried to reach for her hand, but pain stopped him. Please tell me there's a way back. Tell me I can fix this. Elena looked at this man who had spent years convincing her she was worthless, who had pointed a gun at her face, who had been willing to destroy her rather than let her go. And she felt something shift inside her chest. Not forgiveness, but the absence of hatred. The kind of emptiness that meant she was finally done carrying the weight of his choices. There's no way back, Elena said gently. Not for us. But maybe... She paused, choosing words carefully. Maybe there's a way forward for you, alone, learning to be someone who doesn't need to own another person to feel whole. I don't know how to be that person. Neither did I, Elena said. But I'm learning. You'll have 7 to 15 years to figure it out. She turned to leave, but Damien's voice stopped her. Elena, did he do this? Vescari? Elena looked back. Does it matter? It matters if you let him. It matters if you're becoming what I was, someone who uses violence to solve problems. The observation landed harder than Elena expected. She stood at the threshold between the man who had destroyed her and the life waiting beyond these hospital walls, and for the first time she wondered if Damien might be right about something. Get better, Elena said finally. Or don't. But either way, this is the last time we speak. She walked out without looking back. Sophia caught up to her in the hallway. How do you feel? Empty, Elena admitted. Is that normal? After what you've been through? Yes. The emptiness means you're finally letting go. They rode the elevator down in silence. Outside, dawn was breaking over New York, that particular gray-gold light that made the city look almost hopeful. Roman's car idled at the curb, security flanking it like dark sentinels. Roman stood beside his passenger door, his expression unreadable. He opened it as Elena approached, but she stopped before getting in. "Did you order the attack on Damien?" Roman's eyes met hers directly. "No." "But you know who did." Roman was quiet for a beat too long. "I have suspicions." "Tell me." "Elena, tell me," she repeated, her voice hardening. "If we're going to do this, whatever this is between us, I need the truth. All of it." Roman glanced at Sophia, who wisely chose to study her phone. Then he took Elena's arm and guided her a few steps away from the car, his voice dropping. After the verdict, word spread through certain networks that Damien Cross was a convicted abuser with no protection inside Rikers. That information alone would have made him a target. Inmates have their own code about men who hurt women. Roman paused. Someone may have accelerated that process by ensuring the information reached the right people. Someone meaning you. Someone meaning people who work for me, Roman clarified, without my knowledge or consent. Elena stared at him, reading the truth beneath the careful words. Roman hadn't ordered the hit directly, but his people had acted on what they believed he wanted, the invisible hand of his influence operating on autopilot. "So you're saying you didn't do it, but you're responsible anyway?" "Yes." The honesty cut deeper than lies would have. Elena looked at this man who had saved her, protected her, given her space to heal, and who had just demonstrated that his world operated by rules she barely understood. "I can't do this," Elena said quietly. Roman's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Can't do what?" "This. Us. Whatever we're building. Because if I stay with you, I'm complicit in your world. In the violence, in the consequences that come from your kind of power." Elena's voice cracked. "Damien was right about one thing. If I let this happen, I become part of it." "You asked me not to kill him," Roman said carefully. "I kept that promise." "You found a loophole," Elena countered. "You didn't pull the trigger, but you loaded the gun and put it in someone else's hand. That's not mercy, Roman. That's just murder with extra steps." Roman was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then he nodded slowly. "You're right." Elena blinked, surprised. She'd expected argument, justification, the kind of manipulation dressed as logic that Damien had specialized in. But Roman just stood there, accepting her words without defense. "I crossed a line," Roman continued, his voice low and rough. "And I did it, knowing it might cost me you. Because some part of me believes men like Damien Cross deserve consequences beyond what courts provide." He paused. "But that doesn't make it right, and it doesn't mean you have to accept it." "So what now?" Elena asked. "Now you decide. If this is where we end, I'll accept it. Your security stays in place. The brownstone is yours as long as you need it. Sophia continues handling your legal matters. Nothing changes except my presence in your life." "You'd really walk away?" "If that's what you need to heal," Roman said quietly, "then yes. Because keeping you when you don't want to be kept makes me exactly what I'm trying not to be." Elena looked at this complicated, dangerous man who had somehow become the safest person she knew, and she felt something crack open inside her chest, not breaking, but shifting, making room for a truth she'd been avoiding. She didn't want him to walk away, but she also couldn't ignore what his world demanded of her. "I need time," Elena said finally, "to figure out who I am when I'm not running from Damien or depending on you. To learn if I can want you without needing you." Roman nodded. "How much time?" "I don't know. Months, maybe. However long it takes to feel like myself again. And if you decide I'm not worth the cost, then I'll tell you," Elena said, "and you'll let me go without consequences. That's the deal." Roman extended his hand formally, like they were sealing a business contract. "Deal." Elena shook it, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers, the calluses that came from a life she would never fully understand. Then she got in the car alone and left Roman standing on the hospital curb as dawn broke over Manhattan. The next 6 months moved like water finding new paths, slow at first, then faster as gravity pulled everything forward. Elena threw herself into rebuilding with the kind of ferocity that came from having nothing left to lose. She enrolled in a marketing certificate program at NYU, reigniting the career ambitions Damien had spent years extinguishing. Her professors recognized raw talent beneath years of suppression, and by month 3, Elena had landed a junior position at a boutique agency in Soho. She reconnected with old friends tentatively, testing whether relationships could survive 3 years of absence. Some couldn't. Too much distance, too many unreturned calls. But others welcomed her back with the kind of fierce loyalty that reminded Elena what real friendship looked like. Her sister Amy became a constant presence, visiting twice a week with her kids, who called Elena Auntie, and didn't know anything about the darkness she'd survived. Playing with them, finger painting, and building blocks and bedtime stories felt like touching something clean after years of swimming through filth. Dr. Chen's therapy sessions peeled back layers of damage Elena hadn't known existed. They worked through her relationship patterns, the ways Damien had exploited insecurities Elena hadn't realized she carried, the long process of learning to trust her own judgment again. "You're making remarkable progress," Dr. Chen said during a session 4 months in. "How does that feel?" "Terrifying," Elena admitted, "because now I have to decide what I want instead of just reacting to what I've survived." "And what do you want?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. "I want to help people like me, women who are trapped and don't know how to get out." The idea had been germinating since the trial, growing stronger with each passing week. Elena started volunteering at a domestic violence shelter in Queens, offering her story as proof that escape was possible. She sat with women whose eyes carried the same hollow fear hers once had, and she told them the truth. Leaving was the hardest thing they would ever do, but staying was harder. By month 5, Elena was working with Sophia to establish the Whitmore Foundation, an organization dedicated to helping women escape abusive relationships. They secured funding through anonymous donors Elena suspected were connected to Roman, though he never confirmed it. The foundation launched quietly with a single safe house in Brooklyn and a 24-hour hotline staffed by survivors. Within weeks, they were overwhelmed with calls. Within months, they were expanding. Elena found purpose in the work, the kind that came from transforming pain into something that helped others survive their own darkness. She thought about Roman constantly. He'd kept his word, disappearing from her daily life while maintaining invisible protection. Security still watched her brownstone. Sophia still handled legal matters, but Roman himself stayed away, giving Elena the space she'd demanded. Until one evening in late spring when Elena was working late at the foundation office and looked up to find him standing in the doorway. He looked different, older somehow, weathered by whatever 6 months without her had cost. His hair had more silver at the temples. New lines creased the corners of his eyes. "Hi," Roman said quietly. Elena's heart stuttered. "Hi, I know you asked for time. I'm not here to rush that." Roman stepped inside, his hands in his pockets, like he didn't know what else to do with them. I wanted you to know that I'm selling the construction business." Elena blinked. "What?" "The legitimate side of what my family built. I'm liquidating the holdings and putting the proceeds into a trust. Half goes to your foundation. The other half funds similar organizations across the country." Roman, I'm not asking for forgiveness," Roman interrupted, "or trying to buy my way back into your life. I'm trying to be someone worth your time, if you ever decide to give it." Elena stood slowly, her mind racing. "Why?" "Because you were right, about everything. My world requires violence, and I can't ask you to accept that. So I'm building a different world." Roman's voice was rough with something Elena couldn't identify. "It won't be fast. It'll take years to untangle my family's legacy from its darker roots. But I'm trying. What about your people, the men who depend on you? They'll adapt or find other work. Vincent thinks I'm insane. My father's old associates think I've betrayed everything the Vescari name stands for. But..." Roman's dark eyes met hers directly. "I'd rather betray a legacy than betray what you made me see in myself." Elena felt tears building behind her eyes. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did. Because I love you. And love means becoming someone worthy of being loved back." The words hung between them like smoke after a fire, honest and raw, and carrying the weight of 6 months spent apart. Elena crossed the office slowly, each step feeling like jumping off a cliff. She stopped inches from Roman, close enough to see the exhaustion in his face, the vulnerability he usually kept buried beneath layers of calculated violence. "I don't know if I can do this," Elena whispered. "I don't know if I'm fixed enough to try." "You're not supposed to be fixed," Roman said gently. "You're supposed to be healing, and maybe, if you'll let me, we can heal together." Elena looked at this man who had saved her and terrified her in equal measure, who had given her space when she needed it and was now offering a future neither of them could predict. She thought about Damien lying broken in a hospital bed, about the violence that had brought Roman into her life and the violence he was trying to leave behind. She thought about the woman she used to be and the woman she was becoming, and she made a choice. Elena rose on her toes and kissed Roman with the kind of desperate hope that came from believing redemption was possible even after everything they'd survived. Roman kissed her back carefully, his hands coming up to frame her face like she was something precious and fragile that might shatter if he held too tight. When they broke apart, Elena was crying. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "Me too," Roman said, "but I want to try." "Then we try. Slow. Honest. With room for both of us to walk away if it stops working." "Deal," Elena whispered. They stood together in the foundation office as evening light spilled through windows overlooking Queens, two broken people trying to build something whole from the rubble of their pasts. A year later, the Whitmore Foundation operated across 3 states with emergency shelters, legal teams, and anonymous protection programs that had helped over 200 women escape situations like the one Elena had survived. She'd become a voice for survivors, speaking at conferences and writing articles about the subtle destruction of emotional abuse. Roman had kept his promise, systematically dismantling the darker aspects of his family's empire while building something cleaner. It was slow, dangerous work. Some of his father's old associates didn't accept the transition peacefully, but Roman navigated it with the same calculated precision he'd once used for violence. And gradually, the Vescari name began meaning something different. They'd moved carefully into their relationship, learning each other without the urgency of survival driving every interaction. Elena discovered that Roman was terrible at cooking, obsessed with old jazz, and surprisingly gentle with the women who came through the foundation seeking help. Roman learned that Elena needed space when she got overwhelmed, loved terrible reality TV, and had a wicked sense of humor that surfaced once she felt safe enough to express it. They fought sometimes, real fights where they said hard truths and had to work through them rather than letting resentment fester. Elena learned that Roman's instinct was still to solve problems with power, and he learned that Elena's instinct was still to shrink when confronted. But they caught themselves, corrected course, chose differently. On a cold December evening, they stood together on the balcony of the brownstone that had become theirs instead of his, overlooking Brooklyn as snow began falling across the city. Elena wore one of Roman's oversized sweaters, her hair pulled back, her face carrying the kind of peace that came from hard-won healing. "I heard from the parole board," Elena said quietly. "Damien's being released in 3 months. Good behavior." Roman's hand tightened slightly on his coffee cup, but his voice remained calm. "How do you feel about that?" "Nervous, but not terrified. He can't hurt me anymore. I won't let him." Elena paused. "Do you think he learned anything?" "I don't know. People either learn from consequences or they don't. We'll find out which kind he is." "And if he comes near me?" "Then we handle it legally. The restraining order is still active. Sophia's on standby, and—" Roman smiled slightly. "I've learned there are ways to protect people without resorting to violence." "Really? You? Roman Vescari?" "I'm a work in progress," Roman said, pulling her close. "Just like you." Elena leaned into his warmth, feeling snowflakes catch in her hair. She thought about everything that had brought them here. The abuse that had nearly destroyed her, the violence that had saved her, the long process of learning to trust again. Life wasn't perfect. Elena still had nightmares sometimes. Roman still struggled with instincts that came from decades of living a certain way. But they were trying, and trying was enough. The Foundation's hotline rang inside the brownstone. It forwarded to Elena's personal line after hours for emergencies. She pulled away from Roman and answered. "Whitmore Foundation, this is Elena." The voice on the other end was young, female, terrified. "I need help. My boyfriend, he says if I try to leave, please, I don't know what to do. Oh. Elena's expression shifted immediately, her own trauma transforming into fierce protectiveness. You're safe now. Tell me where you are. We're going to get you out. She spent the next hour coordinating extraction, dispatching the Foundation's emergency response team, arranging temporary housing, walking a terrified woman through the first steps of escape. Roman stood nearby the entire time, making calls to his own network, ensuring security and legal protection would be in place before the woman left her apartment. By the time they finished, it was past midnight. The woman was safe in a shelter. Her abusive boyfriend would wake to find her gone and a restraining order filed against him before he could react. Elena collapsed onto the couch, exhausted but satisfied. Roman sat beside her, pulling her feet into his lap and massaging them absently. You were incredible tonight. I was terrified, Elena admitted. Every time someone calls, I remember what it felt like. But that's why I can help them. Because I survived it. You didn't just survive it. You transformed it into something that saves others. Elena smiled tiredly. We transformed it. You funded the foundation. Your people provide security. Your lawyers fight the legal battles. We're doing this together. Roman was quiet for a moment, his hand stilling on her feet. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black box. Elena's breath caught. I'm not asking you to marry me, Roman said quickly. Not yet. I know you need more time, and I respect that. But I want you to have this. He opened the box to reveal a vintage emerald ring, simple and elegant, and carrying the weight of history. It was my grandmother's. She wore it through 2 wars and 40 years of marriage to a man who wasn't easy to love. She told me once that real love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other even when it's hard. Elena stared at the ring, tears building in her eyes. I'm not asking you to wear it now, Roman continued. I'm asking you to keep it until you're ready, until you know for certain that this, us, is what you want for the rest of your life. No pressure, no expectations, just a promise that when you're ready, I'll be here. Elena took the box with trembling hands. The emerald caught the light, throwing green fire across her palm. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, hollow, terrified, convinced she would never escape the cage Damien had built around her. She thought about the woman she was now, scarred but whole, broken but healing, learning to trust herself again. And she thought about the future stretching ahead, uncertain and terrifying and full of possibility. Ask me again in 6 months, Elena said softly. Roman smiled, the kind of smile that transformed his entire face from dangerous to gentle. Deal. They sat together as snow continued falling beyond the windows, 2 survivors building something neither of them had thought possible. Outside, New York churned on, indifferent to their story. But inside the brownstone, there was warmth and safety and the fragile hope that healing was real. Elena curled against Roman's side, the ring box still clutched in her hand, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring, because tomorrow was hers to decide. And she had finally learned how to make choices that didn't destroy her. In a cell 300 miles away, Damien Cross sat alone counting days until release and wondering if redemption was possible for men like him. In Brooklyn, Elena chose not to think about him at all. In his office, Roman Vescari signed papers transferring another piece of his family's legacy into something cleaner. And in shelters across 3 states, women Elena would never meet found the courage to leave because someone had proven it was possible. The story didn't end with perfect happiness. Life never did. But it ended with the possibility of better tomorrows built on hard-won lessons and second chances that only came from refusing to give up. Elena had learned that survival wasn't about erasing the past. It was about refusing to let the past define the future. It was about taking broken pieces and building something new, something that honored the woman she'd been while celebrating the woman she was becoming. And standing on that balcony years later, on the anniversary of the night Roman Vescari had walked into her nightmare and offered an escape, Elena understood a fundamental truth that Damien had tried to steal from her. She had always been worth saving, she just needed to believe it herself. The city stretched endlessly below, full of other stories being written, other survivors finding their way toward light. And Elena, scarred, strong, finally free, was ready to help them find it. Because that was what love really meant. Not possession, not control, not cages disguised as protection, but the fierce determination to see another person's humanity and fight like hell to help them remember their own. That was the legacy Elena chose to build. And it was enough.